"You're a disgrace," Charles said one evening after another call from the school. "If you worked for me, you'd be fired." Lucas crossed his arms, rolling his eyes. "But I'm not your employee. I'm your son. The world doesn't care. Either you make something of yourself, or you'll just be another rich kid living off the family name, and I'm not going to carry you." The silence that followed landed like a punch. Charles wasn't joking. He was dead serious. His name was Lucas Reed, the only son of Charles Reed, a tech mogul whose name graced the cover of Forbes as regularly as the seasons changed. Lucas grew up surrounded by private jets, personal chefs, and birthday parties with celebrity guest lists. But for all he had, he lacked one thing: purpose. At 17, Lucas was a student at one of Atlanta's most prestigious private high schools, Westbridge Academy, not because he'd earned his spot, but because the Reed name opened doors like a master key. No tests, no interviews, just a wire transfer and a reputation that spoke for itself. But in the halls of Westbridge, the Reed name couldn't answer any questions for him. In history class, Mr. Peterson was mid-lecture. Lucas leaned back in his chair, staring out the window, his mind already on his upcoming summer in Monaco. "Lucas," Mr. Peterson's voice pulled him back. "Can you tell the class the significance of the Battle of Gettysburg?" Lucas smirked. "Significance? I'd say it's a lot less significant than the new app my father's company just launched." The class fell silent. Then a few nervous chuckles rippled through the room. Mr. Peterson sighed. It was the same thing every day. Lucas never took school seriously. He mocked his teachers and ignored his peers, convinced the Reed name was an all-access pass, more valuable than any grade. To Lucas, school was just a place to kill time before he inherited his father's empire. He wore the most expensive clothes, but his grades were the absolute worst. He was a joke no one dared to laugh at out loud. At home, the atmosphere was even worse. His father, Charles, was not a patient man. He didn't care about designer clothes or lavish parties. He cared about results. "You're a disgrace," Charles said flatly one evening, after receiving an email from the school. His voice was ice. "Shape up or you won't see another dime from me." Charles wasn't bluffing. Lucas could see it in his father's eyes. This time, it was different. The Reed name might open any door in the world, but it looked like it was about to stop opening his father's wallet. Charles kept his word. The Monaco trip was cancelled, the private jet was grounded, the credit cards were cut off. Instead, Lucas received an address and a command: get a job and earn your own money. The glossy black Rolls-Royce pulled up to the Oakwood Community Center, an old brick building tucked away in a modest neighborhood. It looked completely out of place. So did Lucas. He stepped out, dressed in a designer hoodie and pristine white sneakers. He looked at the building as if it was something dirty to be avoided. This was his father's punishment, a humiliation. Lucas's first assignment was in the stockroom, a hot, cluttered room piled high with donated goods. The smell of old books and second-hand clothes hit him the moment he walked in. His job was to sort through them. A woman named Diaz, the manager, offered a friendly smile. "Welcome. Just sort the books into the blue bin and the clothes into the black bags." Lucas didn't reply, just mumbled something under his breath. He worked with the attitude of a prince forced to take out the trash. He tossed books into the bin and threw clothes into bags with careless disdain. He sighed constantly, pulling out his latest smartphone to scroll, ignoring the work piling up around him. To him, these people were invisible, just like the second-hand junk he was handling. He just wanted the day to be over. He didn't belong here. A few days passed in a lethargic haze. Lucas was given a new task: reorganizing the center's library section. It was a quiet room, filled with the scent of old paper and dusty sunlight. He was pushing a cart piled high with donated books, paying no attention to where he was going. His mind was on some distant beach. Lost in thought, the cart's wheel caught on the leg of a table. Crash! The whole cart tipped over. A stack of old books tumbled to the floor, scattering everywhere. Their covers were torn, their yellowed pages spilling out. "Just great," Lucas muttered, staring at the mess with disgust. Another annoying task. He was about to bend down in annoyance when a figure appeared silently in the doorway. It was an older black woman in a blue janitor's uniform. Her hair was streaked with grey, and she was holding a broom. Lucas had seen her gliding through the hallways a few times, a quiet presence he'd never paid any mind to. He braced himself for a complaint or a disapproving glare, but the woman said nothing. She quietly set her broom in the corner, walked over, and slowly knelt beside the pile of books. Lucas froze, surprised. Instead of scolding him, she gently picked up a book with a frayed cover. She dusted it off with a reverence that caught him off guard. "This poor book," she said, her voice low and gentle. "It's been on quite a journey." She flipped to the first page. "This one's To Kill a Mockingbird. I first read it when I was younger than you are now. It changed the way I saw the world." Lucas didn't know what to say. He reluctantly crouched down and started picking up books, mostly to escape the awkward silence. Evelyn picked up another, a book of poetry with a broken spine. "And this one," she smiled, "this one must have been read over and over. See, every crease, every stain. That's a story about someone who loved it." Lucas paused. He looked down at the book in his own hands. For the first time, he didn't see a pile of old paper. He saw something that had once been cherished. He looked up at Evelyn. Her eyes held no judgment for his clumsiness, only a calm, deep wisdom. He was silent, and for the first time in days, he was truly listening. He wasn't just hearing about books. He was hearing about a world money couldn't buy, a world he had never known. The next day, Lucas returned to the library. He wasn't assigned to be there. He was drawn by a strange new curiosity. He found Evelyn wiping down the windows, still in her blue uniform, quiet and almost invisible. "That book, To Kill a Mockingbird," Lucas spoke up, his voice tinged with a slight awkwardness. "What's it about?" Evelyn paused her work, turning to look at him. A faint smile touched her lips. "It's about courage, about standing up for what's right, even when the whole world is against you." She didn't lecture. Her words were simple, but they gave him pause. Over the next few days, their brief conversations became a quiet routine. While Lucas was shelving books, he'd ask Evelyn about an author he'd never heard of. While mopping the floors, Evelyn would recite a line from Shakespeare or share a favorite fable. Lucas began to realize that Evelyn seemed to know something about everything. Her wisdom didn't come from a fancy school like his. It was forged in life, in the thousands of books she'd read, and in lived experience. In Evelyn's presence, Lucas's arrogance began to melt away. He no longer saw a janitor, he saw a mentor. He began lingering after his shifts, not because he had to, but because he wanted to hear more. He started asking her the big questions about purpose, happiness, and what a person's worth truly is. Evelyn never gave him a straight answer. Instead, she'd hand him a book. "Read this," she'd say, offering him a worn-out novel. "The answers you're looking for might just be in here." For the first time in his life, Lucas took a book home that wasn't a school assignment. He sat in his lavish bedroom, surrounded by expensive things, and began to read. Each page opened up a new world, and with every word, seemingly guided by the memory of Evelyn's warm voice, the emptiness inside him began to fill. And so, their unlikely mentorship began not in a prestigious classroom, but among the dusty shelves of a community library. Summer came to an end. Lucas had to return to Westbridge Academy, but this time, something inside him had changed. He still sat at the same desk in Mr. Peterson's history class, but instead of staring out the window, he was actually listening. His feet were no longer propped up on his backpack, and on his desk lay an open notebook. When Mr. Peterson assigned an essay on the economic causes of the Civil War, Lucas didn't let out a bored sigh. Instead, after class, he headed straight for the community library. "I have to write about the Civil War," Lucas told Evelyn as she was sweeping. "The economic causes." Evelyn nodded. She didn't just point him to a textbook. She led him to a shelf he'd never noticed before, one filled with memoirs and old letters. "Don't just write about dry numbers and facts," Evelyn advised. "Learn about the people who lived through it. Economics isn't just about money, it's about their hopes and fears. Find the story behind the statistics." Lucas spent the week reading. He wasn't just searching for data, he was trying to understand. He imagined the people behind the words on the page. His essay was nothing like his previous work. It wasn't a copy and paste job from Wikipedia. He wrote about lives, about real people caught in the gears of history. He didn't just present the facts. He connected them to human emotions and motivations. His writing had depth. When he got the essay back, for the first time, Lucas saw a bright red A+ on his paper, along with a handwritten note from Mr. Peterson, an outstanding analysis. "Lucas, truly insightful. I'm very proud of you." Lucas stared at the grade, but the satisfaction he felt wasn't just from the letter. It came from the feeling that he had actually understood something. He wasn't studying for a grade anymore. He was studying to fill the empty spaces inside himself. Whenever he faced a difficult problem, he went to Evelyn, and she, with her simple wisdom, always helped him see the heart of the matter. Slowly, the arrogant, failing student transformed into one of the sharpest minds in his class. The change was so drastic, so sudden, that it was impossible not to notice, especially for his father. The reports from Westbridge that arrived at the Reed household no longer contained complaints. They were filled with praise. Lucas's grades had skyrocketed. Teachers commented on his newfound maturity and active participation. Charles Reed read these emails in his sleek office, surrounded by glass walls overlooking the entire city. He felt a sense of profound surprise, but that surprise quickly curdled into suspicion. Charles was a man who believed in systems, in data, and in measurable change. Lucas's sudden transformation felt like a system error, something illogical. His son, who had spent 17 years proving his own superficiality, couldn't just become a scholar over a single summer. There had to be an external factor at play. One evening, as the two were eating dinner in silence, Charles set down his fork. "Your schoolwork has improved," he stated, his tone more probing than praiseworthy. "Is someone helping you? A tutor?" Lucas looked up, and for the first time, he met his father's gaze without a hint of defiance. "Yes," he replied. "I have a mentor. Her name is Evelyn." "Evelyn?" Charles frowned. He had checked every top tutoring service in the city. No, Evelyn was working with Lucas. "Where does she teach? What are her credentials?" Lucas smiled. "She doesn't teach at a school, but she's the wisest person I've ever met. She taught me how to think, not what to think." He spoke of Evelyn with genuine reverence, describing how she could explain complex ideas in simple terms, how she saw stories where others saw nothing. But throughout the conversation, he carefully omitted the fact that Evelyn was a janitor or that they'd met at the community center. He knew his father, a man who measured people by their titles and status, would never understand. He wanted Charles to meet Evelyn and see her value for himself. Lucas's enthusiasm only deepened Charles's suspicion. It sounded too good to be true. A mysterious mentor with no credentials, no reputation. This had to be some kind of angle. "All right," Charles said, his voice decisive. "I want to meet this mentor of yours." He didn't say it out loud, but his intention was clear. He wanted to vet this woman. He needed to know if Lucas's transformation was real, or just a temporary illusion built by someone untrustworthy. "Of course," Lucas replied, his voice filled with a newfound confidence. "I'll arrange it." A few days later, Lucas brought his father to the Oakwood Community Center. Charles Reed stepped out of the black sedan, his meticulously tailored suit looking utterly alien in the humble surroundings. He eyed the old brick building with a disdainful frown. "This is where you meet her?" Charles asked, his voice dripping with contempt. "Just come inside, Dad," Lucas said simply, maintaining his composure. He held the door open and led his father in. They walked down the hall and into the library. The room was quiet, filled with the gentle rustle of pages and the warm afternoon light slanting through the windows. At the far end of the room, a woman was carefully wiping down a wooden bookshelf. She wore a simple blue janitor's uniform, her back slightly hunched from her work. "There she is," Lucas said quietly, gesturing toward the woman. "That's Evelyn." Charles narrowed his eyes. He strode forward, suspicion etched on his face. He had a barrage of sharp questions ready, prepared to interview this mysterious tutor and expose any gaps in her knowledge. When he was just a few feet away, the woman turned at the sound of his approach. The sunlight caught her face, illuminating the kind lines around her eyes and the wisdom within them. And in that instant, Charles Reed's world stopped turning. The arrogance on his face dissolved, replaced by a look of utter astonishment. His breath caught in his throat, the janitor's uniform, the graying hair. But those eyes, that calm, piercing gaze, he could never forget them. "Professor Wallace?" Charles breathed, his voice barely a whisper. Evelyn studied him for a moment, and then a slow smile of recognition spread across her face. "Charles Reed," she said, her voice as warm as he remembered. "I never expected to see you here. You haven't changed much, though I imagine you worry a little less about your grades these days." Lucas stood frozen, looking from his father to Evelyn, completely bewildered. "Professor? Dad, you know her?" Charles couldn't tear his eyes away from the woman before him. All of his judgment, his contempt for his son's mentor, had just completely imploded. The woman he had dismissed as a mere janitor, the one he had come to vet, was Professor Evelyn Wallace, his former college philosophy professor. She had been one of the most brilliant minds on campus, the one who had challenged his thinking and taught him his most valuable lessons on logic and ethics, lessons that had helped shape the man he was today. He looked at Evelyn's uniform, then at her calloused hands. A profound sense of shame washed over him. He had come here as a superior, ready to pass judgment, but the person he had intended to judge was the very professor he revered most. I didn't know," Charles stammered, his words, normally his sharpest weapon, now failing him. "Professor, why are you here, doing this?" Evelyn smiled gently. "After I retired, I wanted a quiet place to be near the things I love most, books and their stories. A job is just a name, Charles. Our worth isn't defined by the title on a name tag." Her words struck Charles like a physical blow. It was the very lesson she had tried to teach him all those years ago, a lesson he had forgotten on his climb to build an empire. He had judged Evelyn by her uniform, just as he had judged his own son by his failing grades. He had been wrong, terribly wrong. Charles turned to Lucas. For the first time, Lucas didn't see coldness or disappointment in his father's eyes. Instead, there was a complex mix of emotions, regret, surprise, and perhaps a flicker of pride. "Lucas," Charles said, his voice hoarse, I was wrong. I was wrong about you, and I was wrong about her." He took a deep breath. "I'm sorry." Those were two words Lucas never thought he would hear from his father. It wasn't a forced apology, but a genuine admission. Lucas felt a lump form in his throat. He looked at his powerful father, a man he had always seen as a wall of ice, now revealing a moment of vulnerability and remorse. "It's okay, Dad," Lucas said softly. "I was wrong, too." They didn't hug. There were no dramatic gestures. But in that moment, in that humble community library, surrounded by old bookshelves, the wall of ice that had stood between father and son for years finally melted away. That meeting in the library changed everything. Charles Reed no longer saw the Oakwood Community Center with contempt. He saw it through a new lens, a hidden treasure trove of knowledge, a place where miracles could happen. And he knew what he had to do. With all the reverence he held for his old professor, and the newfound pride he had for his son, Charles took action. He didn't just write a check. He leveraged his entire influence and resources to transform the small community center into something magnificent. He funded a complete renovation of the building, purchased thousands of new books, and equipped it with modern classrooms. The project had only one name: the Evelyn Wallace Academy. It wasn't just a school, but an educational haven for underprivileged kids, those who, like the old Lucas, had potential but lacked direction, and those who lacked opportunity but were rich with a thirst for learning. The academy wasn't run by a faceless board of directors. It was led by two people, Lucas and Evelyn. Evelyn, no longer in a janitor's uniform, had returned to her true calling. She was the soul of the academy, a wise and dedicated mentor. She didn't just teach from textbooks. She taught about life, compassion, and humility. At her side was Lucas. The arrogant heir had found his purpose. He no longer hid behind the Reed name. He stood on his own 2 feet, becoming a big brother and a guide to the younger students. He shared his own story, teaching them that a person's worth isn't measured by what they own, but by what they give back. The story ends late one afternoon at the Evelyn Wallace Academy. In the beautifully renovated library, Lucas is patiently explaining a math problem to a young girl. Evelyn stands nearby, watching with a smile. Bright golden sunlight streams through the large windows. The door opens. Charles Reed walks in. He isn't wearing his usual power suit, just a simple button-down shirt. He isn't here to inspect, he's here to help. He quietly walks over to a bookshelf and begins to reshelve misplaced books, a simple, humble task. Lucas looks up and sees his father. They share a look of understanding, a smile that needs no words. They had found a shared purpose. The sight of the two Reeds, the billionaire and the young man, working together in quiet harmony, was a testament to one truth. True growth isn't just about individual success. It's about healing, understanding, and sharing something good with the world. And it all began with a humble mentor among the dusty shelves of an old library.